Strap in. This is going to be a great episode. We're going to talk about the new rules for parts department going into 2025. So we've got a few little tips and tricks and things to focus on. We're also going to talk about Cliff and his living situation. And there's probably something else ridiculous that we're going to discuss as well. That and much, much more coming up today on Parts Hold.
We'll be right back.
All right, Cliff, what part of the country are you in this week?
Well, I'm actually in Illinois, and I've got a proposal that I need help on.
Okay, I'm ready. You might not know this. I'm familiar with the state of Illinois.
That, and you're very familiar with where I'm at.
Extremely familiar.
Which is wildly fascinating to me that I don't know. It's always kind of weird when you talk to somebody like, "Oh, I grew up in the area." And you're like, "Oh yeah," and you're telling them about things. They're like, "Oh yeah, right there. That's where. That's like my house was 10 minutes away from there." It's always kind of it's kind of funky.
Yeah, I get that.
Here's my question.
Okay, I'm ready.
Can I set the stage for this?
Yeah, you're gonna do it anyways, even if I said no.
It's true. So we went on vacation a couple months ago, and we went to a tropical area, as we often do. St. Thomas to be exact. And I came back. Well, let me rephrase that. I've been having some foot issues up until then, some pain in my left foot.
St. Thomas of Virgin Island?
Yes, that's the one.
Not to be confused with Virgin Airlines.
Completely different. But we came back, and I gave my wife a call, Jamie, and I said, "Hey, this weird thing happened. And I want to tell you about it." And so I said my foot was causing me all kinds of trouble. And then last week when we were on vacation, it didn't cause me any trouble. And now here we are this week, and I'm back in regular work type shoes, and my feet are bothering me. So I think that my feet are designed for flip flops or to be barefoot.
So you would write, you want the safety rules regulating that you could wear flip flops in a dealership.
Yeah, I don't know how to do that with OSHA, or can we design a safety shoe flip flop?
Like, what would it be? Clear?
Maybe, or maybe just
like a force field around the flop.
Yeah, maybe non-slip, non-skid flip flop, so you don't slide on any oil or coolant in the garage.
For some reason, I thought maybe your concern would be the open toe part, but no, it's the slipping. Okay, now I understand. So that trip sparked a little bit for you, right? Are you considering relocating out of your fine Charlotte, North Carolina abode?
Yeah, I mean, listen, we've always talked about moving to the coast, or we talked about, my wife tried to get me to do it for years, and I didn't do it. And because, I mean, I live 6 miles where I graduated high school, roughly. So I've never really left the area. So we went down to Charleston, South Carolina, and looked around a little bit, and just didn't quite, it's one of those things, hey, can we see yourselves living here? Couldn't, kind of where we were looking and where we would kind of want to be. And so we just recently went down to Wilmington, North Carolina, and looked around there. And there's a couple spots that we found down there. So,
and how far is Wilmington away from Charleston?
Probably 3 hours.
Okay. And then is Charlotte kind of another 3 hours away from Wilmington?
About 3.5. Yeah. Where I live is 3.5 from Wilmington. Yeah. So it's all about the same. I mean, I could get to Charleston. Used to be I could get there in about 3 hours, a little over 3 hours from Charlotte, from where I live. But so it's all kind of that general area. I don't know. I mean, there's a thing that's really nice being in Charlotte, where I can get anywhere I want to go pretty quickly on an airplane, and I don't have to worry about connections. And all too well that connections throw another opportunity of getting delayed or canceled.
And, people that have not traveled for a living have no understanding of what all of that's like. And I remember when we first met, I told you what an advantage living in Charlotte was going to be, because you happen to, that's just, for those of you that don't travel a lot, that's a really, really big American Airlines hub. Not my favorite airline, but the thing that's important, and whether you like them or not, they go darn near everywhere. And Cliff does most of his work on the, let's say, the east half of the United States. So essentially, he can get on a plane at 7 in the morning and be to his store by 10 o'clock.
Yep.
And kind of contrasting that, just to let you guys know, when I was in the field, I lived in, what would you call that, like a secondary, like a mid-major kind of airport thing, where there was the only direct flights were to places like Charlotte or Atlanta or, Chicago, where I then had to hop another flight. And what Cliff is saying is that if you have a direct flight, your chances of getting there within a reasonable amount of time of expectation, pretty darn good. Like, you can be a half hour late and still okay. But if you have a connection and your first flight's a half hour, 45 minutes late, then you can miss the second connection. And then all of a sudden, a 6-hour trip turns into a two-day ordeal. So what Cliff is trying to weigh, and this is just me essentially translating Cliffism for you all, is he's like, I really like that part of it. But if I move out of Charlotte to get away from the fact that I've lived here my entire life, I now sacrifice that part of travel, which is very difficult, because Wilmington is not going to have the same kind of flight availability that a Charlotte has. So if anyone thinks of a place that Cliff should move that has a really good, healthy, quality airport, put it in the chat. Let's get him out to some of these places and see. I would suggest that I think that he and Jamie would really like Vegas. I would also suggest that he would fit right in downtown Los Angeles. And then something that I is definitely not on this list is Helena, Montana.
No, Montana's not on the list. Vegas, I can get behind Vegas. Vegas has palm trees. They have the warm weather. They don't have the ocean, so I'd miss out on that. But they do have some rather large swimming holes, as they call them down south. It would definitely, that would be in, it's funny you should say that, because I just told Jenny the other day, because anyway, this gets into a whole other area. We could talk about this, but I had to drive from Phoenix to Las Vegas unplanned. And going through Vegas, I was like,
wasn't that because you had a connection issue?
That's exactly why. Exactly why.
The story has come full circle.
So when we're talking about moving, like, that's a big thing, because do you remember when you and I first talked, we also talked about the advantage of living in Charlotte, but we also said, one of the things you said was, there's something about being home on that Friday, like sleeping in your own bed, being at your own thing. So I have a really weird thing where I have to be home Friday night. Like, I'll drive. I don't care. If they cancel my flight Friday from where I'm at, I'm driving home. So, we'll see. Time will tell. LA wouldn't be on the list, though.
I didn't think so.
Vegas could be. I could get behind Vegas.
Yeah, me too. This is a terrible thing. I get realtor.com notifications when new places become available for sale in Vegas. I'm that far into that I would move to Vegas.
Yeah, I can get behind
that. All I need is for this guy, this tall fellow with a beard, to tell me that we can open up an office in Vegas, and I'm out of here.
Man, we should do some satellite offices, different places. That'd be great.
It'd be cool to have libraries all over the place. But okay, so I'm really excited about our topic today, because it is habitual of our industry to live in a broken system and to keep trying to fix a broken system that's been broken for 100 years. And the last few years, there's just been some things that have happened in the marketplace, in society, but they've forced people that were very comfortable in the broken system out. And what we've kind of developed is a few new rules for parts departments. Like, how you ran a parts department in 1997 is the same way you ran a parts department in 1967. Like, there's literally, the bin system was the same, ordering was a little more manual, but it was the same. Like, all the stuff was exactly the same. But if you try to run a parts department now, the way that you ran it in 1997, you're in huge trouble.
I would make a strong argument that the way you run one in 2024 versus 2017 is even going to be different. Now,
so it's even that tighter of a line. That's great.
Yeah. I mean, now, to some degree, within, conversation, there are elements that are still very, very similar. But I do think you're going to have to look at it vastly different than you did for sure 20 years ago. And I could make a case for 5 years ago that I think that things are changing and evolving so quick. And we'll get to that. You can't run it the same.
Okay. So let me put you on the spot there. We haven't talked about this yet. What's one or two things that have not changed about parts departments over the last 50 years?
I mean, you still have a catalog. You still have a customer. So that's the only things, yeah, you're still looking a part up. You're still, going into a system and finding pricing. You're still going to have bins and bin locations for parts. Like that's those things that are never changing.
Yeah, so the overall layout of a parts room hasn't changed. Yeah, okay, I get that. And then I think the other thing I would say that has not changed, I don't know if you're with me on this, but you have to have a skill level to be in a parts department. It's not like a hire somebody for $6 an hour off the street. There's got to be a level of competency and understanding that you have to either have already when you come in, or you have to gain it really quickly. Like it's not a mindless job.
You have to be a good problem solver, and I think there has to be some analytical aspects of your personality that have to be there too.
Oh, like yeah, you got to be a free thinker a little bit.
I don't know they have to have automotive knowledge. They have to have the ability to problem solve.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So you made a little list, the 3 new rules of parts departments in 2024/2025.
Let's count down with starting with number 3, a little tongue in cheek, but no FaceTime. We have to be figuring out how to keep specifically technicians away from the counter. Like we've got to figure out how to get them past staying there all day and having conversations and getting more efficient. From a parts manager perspective, like I know that every hour that's turned for labor or every hour that or dollar that's sold in the shop, I'm getting roughly $1 for that. Some are lower, some are higher, but let's just call it $1. But I know that I'm getting $1 for every dollar. So every time they're staying at the counter, like they're not in their stalls working. And so I need to get them away from the counter. And so I need to figure out whatever that looks like and however that looks like. But the efficiency side of it, I've got to get under control.
There's a couple of things I thought about with that too, is that most of the time, at least, from what I experienced, was when the tech did go in and talk directly to the parts department, the conversations were 50% work. So that means that your counter people are also not as efficient as the technician, which means that something's not getting counted, something's not getting inventory, call-in orders not getting filled, the phone's not getting answered. All that stuff kind of happens when the technician and the counter people are gabbing with each other, or service advisors and counter people, et cetera, et cetera. So the other thing that kind of, I think that really sparks with me why this number 3 is so important is that we're really getting to a point with like inspections and videos and all that other stuff that like a lot of these things are happening automatically, where like a video is taken, a request goes right to parts are added to an estimate, they're going to a customer really fast. And if you don't have the timing right, if one of those things, like whether it's the work into the shop, the inspection happening, the video being created, the information getting, the part estimate getting added, and then the advisor, like if any one of those things are messed up in the timing, the customer gets junk. So you've got to have like a coordination with all of those things going on, and every minute matters way more than it used to.
Kind of to that same thing, like you're saying, that them being able to send a request in, whether it's through some parts request through the DMS or through a request through their multi-point inspection tool, or heck, through just email or text message for that matter. Like the ability for a technician to remain in their stall, remain productive, remain working, and for me, a parts guy, to get the parts to them, it's so much simpler now. And you don't have to hear about how mad they were because their team lost the game, or they are sick of their misbehaving kids, or their wife are not getting along. Like that bar counter talk, as we've called it before, doesn't happen. Production goes up, the more opportunities to sell parts, you know, it just starts compounding on top of itself, and this thing really starts growing. But getting people away from the counter effectively and efficiently, that no FaceTime, like, let's get them out of there.
Great. All right. What's the next new rule?
So it kind of piggybacks into the same thing, because when you're thinking about the way customers approach things, so number 2 is see what opportunities are out there. There are a handful of managers that I've spoke to recently that are really still hesitant over the online e-commerce kind of thing. And they're kind of waffling back and forth. Do I do it? Do I not do it? Should I go? Should I not? Like, should I try it? I can tell you with certainty that I can go on the computer right now. I can order a part for my vehicles from a store that is 3.5 hours away from me, and I can have it quicker than the one that is 15 minutes down the road from me. And that is factual.
And you don't have to drive to the dealership to get it. It's actually delivered to you faster to your house, that you don't go anywhere.
Yeah, and with our job, we're gone, 5 days a week, or 4 nights a week, 5 days a week. And so my time is valuable to me. And so having it, to your point, having it at my doorstep to where I can come home on a Friday night and install it, or Saturday morning, like, that's invaluable to me. And I got to be completely honest with you, pricing doesn't matter in that scenario.
So, I mean, one of the basic parts of I feel like we've talked about this before, but it probably warrants a discussion again, is that you're right. If you have an angle that you can compete on besides price doesn't matter near as much. And I'm 100% with you. If I don't have to go somewhere and pick something up, and if I can get it 2 days faster, I will pay quite a bit more money for that thing. And then as a parts manager, thinking about the opportunity, there's this criticism that always makes me think of this, like when it comes to e-commerce, and it's to the man with a hammer, the world is a nail. And we could hate e-commerce and say, I don't do that newfangled. Like, I don't know if you understood this. Like, e-commerce came 30 years ago. There's this guy, his name is Al Gore. He invented the World Wide Web, which is a computer system that allows us to basically transact and communicate with people all over the planet. And so when Al created this, he's like, you know what parts departments are going to want to do is have e-commerce. And all the parts managers are like, whoa, I just want to do my stock order. And so I think the new rule is that you have to embrace that e-commerce is an advantage, not an extra sore or a pain or whatever it is, right? So it reminds me of so your kids are a little bit older, okay? But I've got a 12-year-old, okay? And do you understand they have a whole language that is not English? Have you heard about this with the Riz and Skibbity and
No,
you don't know any of this?
I have zero clue about that.
Sigma, there are words that I've heard before but have a completely different meaning and context with the 12-year-old. Guess what I've learned? I can learn that language and then I understand what my child is saying and communicate with him.
That's great.
Or
I thought you were going somewhere else.
Yeah, this is often the case with us. But my belief is that it's important enough for me to communicate with my child that if it means I have to kind of learn a stupid new language, that I can learn a stupid new language. And that makes me think of people in the parts department all the time, is because we can sit there and talk about the glory days and how it used to be and all that stuff. That does not help us sell parts at a really healthy price to run a really healthy department right now. Whatever the thing is, whatever the environment is, we have to adapt to the environment. The environment does not have to adapt to us. As a matter of fact, that is a proven system for failure.
To follow up on that, 2 things. Number 1, everything that you said was probably maybe the best thing that you said since we've been doing this podcast. Like, pure gold, comic gold in there as well, with the Al Gore thing. So bravo to that. But completely agree. Like, we keep talking about e-commerce, and e-commerce, Amazon's now like 30 years old. eBay's like, 30 years. Like it's been around for a really long time and they figured it out. And people are buying stuff. Like I come home every weekend to Amazon packages. Like we're either taking them back. You know, the other side of all of that is these businesses that are doing business online and have become huge businesses, like the clothing that I'm purchasing most of the time now comes from a store online. I don't even know that they have a storefront.
Yeah, exactly. There's no brick and mortar.
They figured it out and they've made it super simple for me that if I get it and I don't like it, the return is so simple. It's a win-win for me. Like if I get something and it's not quite the right fit or the right thing that I wanted, it's so simple to send it back. Yet we've made it so challenging because we don't see the opportunity that's out there in front of us. Like it's kind of mind blowing to me that I'm still having the conversation with managers out there, directors, owners, GMs, like everybody, of whether we should get involved in e-commerce. I think if you're getting involved, and I think if you're considering it now, you may be too late to the game. Like you almost have to reinvent whatever you're going to do.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean stay on the sidelines. I mean, you just
Absolutely
because you're
not.
late doesn't mean you don't hop in. And then I always think it's funny that, and we probably need to go on to the next thing, but this is a very, very important thing for everybody to understand is that like, I've heard it so many times where someone comes into the counter and like, what's the part number in this? And they'll be, oh, that jerk's just going to go to buy it off of Amazon. And my whole thing about that is that, okay, so we know that that's the competitor. We know that that's the enemy. What is it that we can do better than they can? Instead of just resolving to the fact that the customer's mean or bad or whatever it is because they go to Amazon, what if we over delivered better than Amazon?
Yeah. Yeah.
So to the
Completely agree.
man with a hammer, the world is a nail. And that is exactly what we're talking about.
Well, that leads me right into number one. And this is the single most important thing when we're talking about new rules that I'm having conversations with dealers, with general managers, with fixed directors, service managers, parts advisors, everybody in the store. The single most important thing to focus on right now in a new world, new rules for parts managers is get a clean inventory. And that's multiple layered, that clean as in organized, clean as in efficient, clean as in I have the right parts, clean as I'm testing stuff, clean as in I've gotten rid of obsolescence and obsolescence is not an issue with my store. Like we've got to figure that out as parts managers, and it has to be the primary focus. I think too many parts managers have been, a little free willy with their inventories. Much to your point at the beginning of this whole thing was operating in 1997. Like in 1997, inventory conversation wasn't quite as heavy as it is now, but it is super important now.
Does that they're acting free willy, that they are an orca that jumps over an island?
I don't know what that is a reference to.
The movie Free Willy. Did you just use the term Free Willy not knowing what Free Willy was?
No. I remember Free Willy from like back in the 90s, but I didn't remember him jumping over any island. I remember it in captivity.
No,
but maybe I haven't watched it in a while.
What? Okay, now I know what this is all about. So you didn't mean Free Willy. What you meant was willy nilly.
Willy nilly. Play on words, however you want to do that.
Cliff.
But inventory has to be the focus. Like you can't get by anymore with just hoping that it fixes itself. The manufacturers have put such a tight constraint on our ability to return parts that we have to be really, really efficient in the way we handle our inventories. We have to be really, really technical in the way we handle our inventories. And then with a market that continually changes and is pretty volatile, not knowing what happens with sales and is there going to be, is used car values going to drop? Are they going to rise? Or the new car is going to be available? Are we going to have another pandemic where we can't get, some part from some obscure place? Like all of that could be true, but we've got to figure out the inventory. Like it's vital for us to figure out.
That's right. He or she who has the best, and a very important word, best. He or she who has the best inventory wins. Best doesn't mean the biggest.
Correct. One completely agree with that statement.
The best inventory. So if there was like one skill that, and we're going to talk about this on a future episode about like, being irreplaceable as a parts manager, inventory management's probably number one.
Agree. I would spend, as a parts manager now, I would spend more time figuring out my inventory than probably like that would take up probably 50% of my time now. Whereas before maybe it did.
How's the inventory on the Cliff action figures?
We're getting ramped up for Christmas. Christmas is coming right around the corner. Top Dog's coming up really, really soon. Like, we've got to get production going really, really soon. We've got a pretty strong candidate of supplier. Maybe you've heard about this company, Hasbro.
Yeah, so info at chriscollinsinc.com if you're looking for a Cliff action figure. We do ship right to your door, probably using Amazon or UPS or something like that everyone hates. But for the kind of just to wrap this episode up, there's some new rules out there, parts managers, parts counter people. Let's get ahead of the curve instead of just trying to keep up with it. So with that, we will see you all next time on Parts Hold.
Here to fill the order.